out, vile jelly!
Never.
Nah, Uncle. I keep me coxcombs myself.
And as a stranger to my heart and me, hold thee from this forever.
Good evening, my name is Claire. Welcome to Jare to Jared. On this week's episode, the Jareds will discuss William Shakespeare's King Lear, giving your life the truth and authenticity, breaking the mold, gouging eyeballs, Andor, and much, much more. Let the games begin.
As King Lear does, right? Because King Lear... I think we're on Lear now.
Let's do it.
Howard. But King Lear starts off in a state of deception. He's deceiving himself. He is willfully deceiving himself and living in this state of deception and masks and rhetoric. He says to his daughters, tell me how much you love me, and I'm going to measure your love based on your rhetoric, not based on your feeling, not based on our experiences together in the past, not based on anything real, just the facade of your speech at the moment right now. I'm going to base that. So he's living and welcoming deception into his life. And he's wearing his robes, and there's even some lines on clothing, and someone comments, I think, to Reagan about the jewels and everything that she's wearing. I think the fool at some point saying, what's the difference? You know, if you have all those jewels or you don't, what's the difference? Or maybe it was poor Tom out in the storm. Doesn't matter. Either way, there's this consideration of how we the garments that we wear and how we adorn ourselves versus the emptiness of who we actually are, you know,
Right.
Take off the mask. Who are you? And that's this process of Lear losing everything, losing all of his wealth, losing his authority, losing his power, until he's quite literally naked out in the storm, and then sees the figure of poor Tom, who is naked in the storm. And King Lear says, unadorned man, the thing itself. That's it.
Right.
Strip away the authority, strip away the power, strip away the robes and the riches, and that's who you actually are. All of that other shit was just decoration.
Right.
That was the mold.
Yeah.
And then he goes into the storm. Now he's in the storm, getting rained on, freaking out. And now he's nothing. Now he's gone into the mud, and he's covered in mud. He's emptiness. And then he can arise anew. That's the state from which he's awakened, and can step into a more authentic and real state of love and connection with his third daughter, Cordelia.
Right.
So what does that look like in our own lives? What is the storm, the heath, the buffalo storm of our own lives? How do we strip everything down? How do we strip down our own molds in order to become who we most truthfully are?
Well, I think that it's a tragedy.
Yeah.
Lear. And I think what's happening in this story is old Bill, the bard, Shakespeare. He's trying to tell us that the only way that this sort of maturation happens is when you fuck up so many times in your life.
Yeah.
You get humbled over and over and over again.
Yeah,
our
seriously.
egos just have to get
Just
fucking
chipped
run
away
through the mud for us to get to this point. But by that time that it comes, you'll probably be in a very old man without much any time to recover. And even when you do have a recovery, it's too late. They both end up hanging. That's the ending of the play. Cordelia and Lear hang. Right.
Yeah.
So
Cordelia hangs. Lear just dies of...
Oh, that's right.
despair.
Lear dies from the broken heart of seeing Cordelia, right, dead in her arms. That's terrible.
Yeah.
It's a terrible fate, you know.
Mm-hmm.
There is something beautiful to say that there was a sort of restitution there between Cordelia and Lear. There was a coming back together, a sort of, I don't know. There's a certain word I'm trying to think of there, but
resolution,
a resolution there, right? Which was nice. It's just so sad that it comes so late.
That's the thing. Yeah. It does come very late.
Tragic,
that does come very late.
Yeah.
And that's what's interesting too, because the fool says to Lear at some point, he goes, "You're an old man, but you don't have the wisdom of an old man. The wisdom came too late." And I think a lot of people do live their lives like that. They live into their 70s, 80s, maybe even longer without wisdom. There was a Zen teacher at the Albuquerque Zen Center when I first started sitting meditation, and he would say, everyone grows old, but not everyone grows up. And like, oh, damn, that hit. So that's Lear.
Right.
He's in his 70s and he is misbehaving. He's behaving like a frat boy, right?
Right.
Even when he disinherits himself of his wealth and he's just hanging out at his daughter's house with his 100 knights. What are they doing? They're partying. They're carrying on, drinking, shouting,
the
jumping on the table.
This, right?
Yeah.
And the what is it? The tragedy is essentially an old man that never grew up. Never
exactly.
matured, but has the body of a senior citizen.
Exactly. Yeah. Which is kind of terrifying. A little scary. I guess it's comfortable. Because look, I mean, he had an incredibly comfortable life. He didn't have to deal. We can assume that he grew up royalty. He was a rich kid. He inherited the kingdom and had a pretty comfortable life and didn't have to break his mold. He kept getting to pretend that he is a king and everyone respects him because of who he is, when it's like, no, dude, it's the mask, it's the facade.
Right.
And that's not till the end of his life that he actually gets to see through the facade.
Right.
And have an experience of, now he's suffering, but there's a point in the storm where he turns to the fool and then poor Tom and these other guys and says, "I'm so cold. Are you cold too?"
Right.
And it's the first time in the play that you can see Lear has some sort of empathetic consideration of other people.
Right.
That he steps outside of his own ego enough to go, oh shit, wait, I'm not the only one who's suffering right now.
Right. Right.
And that's the beginning of that awakening process. And I think that's true, because you're stuck in your mold, you're stuck in who you think you are and all your, shit that you're holding on to. And then you suffer, you get humbled by life experience. Life is just tearing you down. And then you say, oh, other people.
Right.
Oh, wow. It's not just me. Okay.
Right.
And then from there, you go even deeper and then get, at some point, just your mold is off. And that seems to happen with Lear. Now you're naked in the storm.
Personal story.
Yeah.
As a younger man, especially growing up in a family of lifelong marriage, parents, and as a young Christian boy growing up in the Christian religion, I was always under the impression that you find your wife, you marry her, and she stays loyal to you forever. And like those whose marriages fall apart, while this is an indication and mark on your manhood, you're weak, you're like couldn't keep your woman,
didn't do it right.
You didn't do it right, you didn't stay close to God, or she was like a heathen or something like that, whatever the case, it wasn't a good thing. A lifelong relationship is what idealism was, to my young teenage brain sort of thing. But that's how I was raised. That's just how I thought things would be, So when things mounted down in every sort of worst possible way ever with baby mama Hillary, My mind was blown.
Wow.
There was times where I was literally King Lear, disassociating from myself. Just like, I couldn't believe it. Just like talking to the jesters, just like,
it called into question everything you thought.
Everything. My whole entire shell at that point was absolutely shattered. Multiple times over and over again. And I think that's one reason why I stayed so long too, is trying to be like, no, this isn't the case. It's still going to work. This is still, my wife, my woman, this and that. And it's like, no, dude, no.
Right.
And then when really like nuclear bombs went off in our relationship, where I knew, final nails in the coffin were had, this student had a really good story where it was very similar to sort of my life thing with that relationship. And at the end, he folds his arms and rolls down a grass hill because peace finally found him. When he realized it was over, it was a really cool ending. But I found myself too being like, oh, you too. I met all these cool people, and like my friend Zay, and like, a lot of my good friends, old friends like Gavin and them, it's like, oh, you too, like you too are also lost. The woman that you loved or were supposed to have as your wife forever. You're also cold. Oh, I'm cold too. You're cold. Like, cool. And then I realized it's like, oh, wait, we're not these bad people that we thought we were, that the type of person, the bad dude or whatever. It's like, no, this is life. Bad things, shit happens. You fall out of love, this and that, whatever. And then my whole entire relationship ideology has changed ever since then, and to say that it's ideal or great now that's a debate in of itself. It's non-existent right now, but you know what I'm trying to say. Just from that previous mold of being young, I King Leared it bad, and then had to come to a point where it's like, I'm a single dad now and I have to deal with it, but I found peace and, made peace with Hillary too and everything, so.
Very, very, very few people get the life they expected.
Right.
Very few, if any, at all.
Yeah.
I think that what you just said, all right, now I'm a single dad and I got to deal with that, right?
Right.
That, the ups and the downs, the pros and the cons of that. I think that one's way more common than, oh yeah, and then I became a rock star and everything worked out.
Right.
just as I expected.
Right.
That's so rare. That can happen sometimes. But most of us, it is this process of constantly growing your humility.
Yes.
Constantly.
Right.
Yeah. And it's devastating though. That's not to say that lightly. It's not an easy process. There's a Zen story. I think there might be a Christian version of it too. But anyway, the Zen version is there's this old Zen master in Japan, and there's all these rumors around him that he's a magician and has all these powers and can bring people back from the dead and all this sort of stuff. And this young woman, she gives birth, and then a few months later, the baby comes down ill and dies. And she is, of course, grieving and just experiencing the worst possible pain that's available to a human being. And then she hears about this Zen master who has all these powers, and she goes and finds him and holding her blue, cold, dead baby and says, please, please, please bring my baby back to life. And the Zen master starts to cry a little bit because he feels that pain and feels compassion for her, and says, what you need to do is go to every house in this village and ask the family if they've lost someone to death. And when you find a family that has not lost anyone to death, that's where you'll find your cure, right? So then she goes into the village, knocks on the first door and says, have you lost anyone to death? And they go, yeah, we lost. There was, the war a few years ago and we lost our son to that. Okay. And she goes, okay, so that's not the right house. She goes to the next one and they go, yeah, my mother got sick and died just a few weeks ago. And then she goes to the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one. And every single house says, yeah, you too. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we've lost someone too. Every single one, until she has gone to every single house in the village and realizes, you too.
Right.
You too. Not a single person has not experienced it.
Right.
Loss, fear, emptiness, despair, grief.
Right.
Not a single person has not. And then she goes back to the Zen master and understands, and there was no, and of course he had no powers other than to be able to show her, I'm sorry, but this is
right.
This is it. This is life, and this is part of the challenge of life.
Love that one.
Yeah. So that's it. And I think that's Lear's story too.
Right.
And then especially at the end when he's holding Cordelia and she's just died and he experiences the worst pain that a parent, that a human being can experience.
What does Cordelia have that keeps her so sane?
That's a great question.
Right? What makes her sort of the ideal to strive for, the character, the unblemished in the play?
Yeah, why is she the representation of truth?
Right.
I have no idea. It just might have been convenient,
Sure.
I'm not sure. What do you think? Is there something about her character that makes her?
Let's see what we have. So the premise, obviously, of the play is bizarre.
Yeah.
He throws a session with his 3 daughters so they can say how much they love him. And that's just weird to begin with.
It's weird.
It's very bizarre. It's very Hans Christian Andersen,
Yeah, however, not to cut you off, but it is very fairy tale-esque. Fairy tale-esque. Yes. Those fairy tales always seem to happen in threes. So you got the 3 daughters.
Right.
But do parents actually do that though?
Oh.
Right? Because they don't do it in such an overt way.
Right.
Or not even parents, lovers, anyone. They don't do it in a completely overt way.
Sure.
Give me a speech about how much you love me. Tell me how much you love me. Make me feel like I'm a king, like I'm wonderful, right?
Right.
We don't necessarily do it overtly, but we're constantly, this is codependency, right? We're constantly trying to get someone else's affirmation and validation so that we can feel secure within ourselves.
Right.
So I think it's like a really on the nose kind of version of that.
Sure.
But I do think people actually do it. It's like
the fantasy version of it.
Yeah, exactly. It's the literalization of something of a very subtle relational dynamic that we all do.
Sure.
Yeah. But go ahead.
And Lear is, let's put ourselves in his shoes. He's also single father. Where's the mom?
That's a great question too. That's a great question too.
And as the single dad of 3 daughters who is aging and wants to retire, wants to give his wealth to, the people that he loves, while he has some of these insecurities, and he sets up this weird thing that's actually sort of like an ego bin for him, a feeding bin, however, his reaction to Cordelia is absolutely absurd. The guy loses his goddamn mind,
Yeah.
But let's put it this way, if I was older or something and would tell Dalton, you're older now, you live with me, go to college with me, or with your mom or something. And she's like, no, actually, I'm just, I like you a lot, but I'm going to go live with mom from now on. And I'd be pretty pissed too. I don't know if I would jump on the table and start screaming Ian Holmes style, taking away inheritance, but it would hurt. There's something about it that would hurt.
Right. Because parents are human too and also want validation even from their kids.
Sure. Yeah. That being said, okay, let's get back to the Cordelia as totally, the meaning of truth. Reagan and Goneril, they buy into this little thing, right? And oh, you're so great, I love you this much, and there's no much freaking telling how much I love you, this and that.
Right.
You're the greatest father ever. Why are they doing that though? They're doing it for inheritance.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not
it's
doing
transactional.
it. Yes, it's transactional. It has nothing to do with their actual feelings towards him.
Right.
And what does Cordelia say? I love you as much as I should love you, as our you know, bond allows me to love you. Like, I love you.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, that's fine. But I'm not going to say anything other than that because A, this meeting's really weird.
Yeah, exactly. She's like, this is totally absurd.
These two sellouts over here, they don't even like you.
Yeah.
And I know you're going to give them freaking, you know, half the kingdom and screw me over anyway. So you know what? Fuck you, honestly. You know? Or just, you know, I like you a lot. That's fine. But I'm not going to buy into this ego driven thing. And I'm not going to deceive you either.
Yeah.
And that's one thing. Cordelia was the only one who actually did love him.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Right.
Oh, the other two are monsters.
She's crying. She's taking care of him. The other two are monsters. They're hooking up with Edmund. They're freaking, you know, they're terrible. They're, you know, causing wars and shit in the kingdom. They're, my God.
I love how, I don't like to use this word, but like, I love how trashy Goneril and Reagan are. They're trashy. Like it's literally like watching a reality show. Right. You're watching, and when people watch reality TV, it's because it's trash and you want to see trashy people doing trashy things. That's what Reagan and Goneril are.
Yeah. Because
you're watching it and you go, oh my God, they're both trying to hook up with the same dude and their sisters, and that guy is,
and the dude they're hooking up with is the bastard of the kingdom. He's he's the
bastard of the kingdom, so he's not a person with any kind of status. He's again
and literally
trashy,
a bastard. He's like the worst. He's mean. He's conniving.
Like an actual bastard. He's mean and terrible. He's horrible.
Bastard. Yeah.
And then they're fighting over the same dude, and the same dude literally has soliloquies or monologues about how he's trying to get both sisters in bed with them. And it's just like, man, you three are the worst people. Like if you met them,
and they're both married.
And they're both married. If you met them or you were at work, someone was, you know, there's always gossip and stuff at work. People would be talking about like, do you know what Reagan did this past weekend? That chick's nuts, bro. Just like that was not okay.
Her sister was there last week.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Like it's so raunchy.
Right.
Yeah. And then you have, Cordelia.
Meanwhile, Cordelia goes and like, you know, a great wife to the French.
Yeah, to the French.
They love her. And she's a great daughter. She's there at the end to care for him. You know, she hangs for him. Yeah.
And then she gets hanged. She's the martyr. She gets sacrificed.
So she speaks to truth. She doesn't engage in falsities, acting, performance. She doesn't engage in performance.
No.
To jeopardize her own moral stance.
Right.
She, you know, and even if this means a loss of money, of status, well, that's not important to Cordelia.
Which she does lose too. She is disinherited of everything as well.
Right.
Luckily, the French come in and say, hey, you can come stay with us. But even if they didn't, you can tell that she would still be truthful and honorable.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's so she's also like a foil too to Lear in the beginning stages too. Whereas, you know, oftentimes our shadow we hate the most, you know, or the thing we want to be so bad, we actually treat the worst because we can't attain it.
Right.
And it's frustrating to us and we get jealous and it's like, oh, well, if you're going to be an amazing basketball player, well, then fuck you, you know, just like I wish I could play basketball, you know, or just like if you're going to be a true blue, cool, good human being, fuck you, because that's what I really wanted, you know, in life. And I want someone like you to love me and accept me because I'm like you.
Yeah.
But I'm not, so fuck you, you know.
Yeah.
And then you get tyrannical and all this shit, you know. Hence Lear.
All right, here's a question.
All right.
Is truth worth it? because if you watch the play,
Right.
and sometimes things work out this way in life. Well, actually, in the play, everyone dies at the end. So, he doesn't draw a binary where the good guys die and then the bad guys succeed. He doesn't draw that binary. Everyone ends up dying in the end. However, that said, what's the point? I mean, Lear, in another universe, if Lear were just slightly smarter, he could have just held on to his wealth and enjoyed the next few years of his life, partying with his friends, hanging out, making jokes with the fool, getting drunk.
The fool told him you're a fool for doing that.
Yeah, he could have just chilled for the rest of his life. But apparently there was something really important about going into the storm, going into the Buffalo storm, stripping himself of the mold, stripping himself of everything that he thought he was, so that he can then step into a state of awakened truth.
Right.
Even though that included seeing the death of his daughter and then himself dying.
Right.
Or Cordelia. Would it have been better if she just said, yeah, you know what? I'm truthful. I'm honorable. I know my sisters are terrible people. I know my dad loves me. Let me just play this game just the one time so I can secure my money and then just get out of here and go do my own thing. Because these aren't healthy people, but let me just get my inheritance first. And then and then she wouldn't have been hanged at the end in this crazy tragedy and all of that.
Right.
Is it worth it?
Right.
Is truth worth it? Because sometimes it does, gets people killed, bro. This is Plato's cave. I mean, the awakened one goes back into the cave ready to teach and they lynch him.
Right. Right.
Is it Christ? Same thing. The story of Christ. Is it worth it?
Right. So this is an interesting philosophical concept, because with rebellion, with people that are seeking truth over power,
mm-hmm.
you have to be willing to do something. You have to be unselfish.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do something that's going to benefit, quite possibly, the future generation that's not you.
Yeah.
I've been watching that. I just finished watching season 2 of Andor, which is like celebrated as the greatest Star Wars show that was ever created.
Yeah.
And it's all about, there's like not one lightsaber in the whole show. It's all about rebellion, the rebels, and the moral questions that you have to take, and like the crazy things they'd have to do, like guerrilla warfare and stealing stuff, and from the Empire and all this.
Great.
And there's this great scene where Skarsgård, Stellan Skarsgård, great acting in the whole show, but he's like, listen, we signed up for this. You know that when you came with me, we were both gonna hang one day. At least it was a possibility inside. And don't try to deny that, because he wants to quit. And he's just like, but you can't. And that's the crazy thing. He's like, we're building a world for tomorrow, a world that we'll never enjoy, Andor.
Yeah.
It's not a world for them, right? The world that they were building was for the future, was for the new republic, So if we don't have people that are willing to die for truth, Cordelia,
mm-hmm.
King Lear, then power reigns supreme. Then we have the empire. Then, quite literally, in Shakespeare's time, King James would have been possibly way more tyrannical, or a tyrant, if he wouldn't even have watched that play, King Lear, that was essentially about him.
Yeah.
So speaking that truth, I don't know. Is it worth it, though, on the individual level? Can you say to yourself, martyrdom sort of thing? And there's even the silent martyrs where you don't know who they are. Will that bring your soul the peace that it so desires? Because we are all going to die eventually one day. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I'm going anywhere with this.
No,
but
I think you are.
Yeah. I do think that it's ultimately worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Though I think the question is, are you going to be that sort of person? Is it going to be worth it to you personally?
Yeah.
Are you willing to give up your family, your wife, your daughters, your dog, your life, your stable home,
Oh, God.
Jim Bob's,
Yeah.
to die for your truth? Are you going to die on that hill? Because if you do, it will have rippling effects, not just for you, but
Right.
for others.
Right.
But if you choose to not die for your truth, it will have rippling effects for those that you love. You'll get to stay in their life. You'll get to do this and that, right? So, I don't know. Thoughts?
Yeah. Wonderful points. Because you take a figure like Edmund,
Right.
the bastard, right? So mean. Dude, so mean.
Oh, man, bastard. Yeah.
So on one level, you can say he's before the end, before he ends up dying, and then retribution happens. You can say that he's on top for a while, and it feels good. I mean, he is hooking up with these sisters,
right?
He's hooking up with these two sisters. He's making some money. Got rid of his brother.
Got the inheritance. Bastard
got this
would
big
never
inheritance.
Get. Right.
So for a moment, this dude, he's got everything. He's got money. He's got women. He's got all this stuff. One, it's shaky because none of it's truly his. There's no authenticity behind it. It's not real, so it's shaky. And then I imagine within himself, he's not happy. He's such a mean person. He's not happy. He doesn't have rich, healthy relationships. He's not a good guy. And sure, he has all this stuff, but ultimately somewhere in his heart, I'm sure there's a level of pain.
Now we're getting to some truth here. Yeah.
A level of pain, a level of guilt, a level of shame, all of that.
Right.
It's really thick, right?
Right.
All the terrible things he's done. He's got to live with that. And even if he doesn't acknowledge the guilt, he's going to be so full of anger his entire life because he's going to be hiding from himself, hiding from the guilt, right? Now compare that with Cordelia, who, she gets hanged in the end, but she is free.
Right.
She's free of any of that.
Yes.
There is no sense
and
of...
her grief comes from the actions of others, how they are acting towards her. It's not her own self, hers. Which is a different type of grief.
Yeah, totally.
That's grief that is manageable. That's grief that is healthy.
Right. Yeah, she's cleared out. She's clear. She can say, I was who I was. I am who I am.
Yeah.
And I lived freely and I have no guilt.
Yes.
There is zero guilt, zero shame, any of that. And then she's hanging, and I'm sure hanging was not pleasant.
No.
But you got to die at some point, and she died free.
Right.
Even though she was a prisoner.
Let's look at Lear too. So I essentially, just to echo this back at you, what I'm hearing is we've come to a truth now. The truth is that if you don't literally sort of be willing to die for your truths, if we don't stand up for our truths, we will be eaten alive for not doing so. We will essentially experience a living death.
Yes, you will never have fully lived.
So you'll never be able to be with your daughter anyways. You'll never be able to be with your family or enjoy your job or your home or your friendships or the Hobbit world, right? The Hobbit world. Because you're living a lie.
You weren't truly there anyway. You're
supporting lies.
You were never truly there.
You're not living your truth. Yeah. Right. So why even live?
Exactly.
So
you were on zombie mode. Yeah.
Fuck my money, fuck the kingdom and everything. Fuck my ego and how I was treating my daughters and all this.
Yeah.
I just want to be free. That's wealth. That's wealth. Freedom.
That's wealth.
That's living. And he finally was able to live, at least for a short time, but he was finally able to live at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. See, and God, it's so hard, bro. It's so hard because I can see in my own experience right now, I'm having a bit of a King Lear moment walking out into the storm. What the fuck's going on? And it's interesting when I can step back from the sense of like, oh fuck, I don't know what I'm gonna do, all that kind of stuff. There's it's hard to describe, but I can see the part of me that's like, oh shit, and like grasping for something to hold on to, like Lear would have, like grasping onto when he's arguing with Goneril and Reagan, and they're like, you can't have 100 knights, and he's like, how about 50?
Right.
And they're like, you can't have 50 knights, and they're like, maybe 25.
Right.
And he's like 25. Wait, you said 50, you know, and he's like, he's bargaining for the shit that he's trying to hold on to.
Right. And Reagan's like, dude, you don't even need one.
Yeah. And finally she's like, you got nothing. It's out.
Yeah.
And then he freaks out. But then that ends up being, now that he has nothing that he can hold on to anymore, now he can go discover his freedom, as painful as it might be. Right. So I can see myself holding on to, oh shit, I need this, I need that plan, I need this, that amount of money. How am I going to do this? And then I can also see, but it's hard to let go into, I can also see a space of freedom.
Right.
Of wait a second, maybe I just don't need to grasp onto shit. I mean, I need to eat and have money and stuff for sure, but like maybe I just don't need to have that grasping sense about it. Maybe I could be Cordelia, who is in the prison getting hanged and saying, well, I lived authentically.
Grasps onto truth instead of power.
Yeah.
And that's why, you know, kicking this to you know, how can we relate this to our own selves?
Right.
Same sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
That's why they say sometimes getting fired is the best thing that can happen to you.
Right.
Because you lose your nights, you lose your protection, you know?
Yeah.
You're sort of out there being exposed, being vulnerable.
Yeah.
Facing that adversity.
Right. And there wasn't authenticity in it, you know?
Right.
Like I have a friend who's going through his company's doing some layoffs or whatever. And he was expressing a similar thing because he hasn't been totally happy with that job for a while. And he's also expressed that he's like, you know, nervous about getting fired and money and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But then he also commented, well, maybe that's exactly what I need.
Right.
Because I've been too scared to bite the bullet and quit and go do something real. You know?
Right?
Yeah.
We think we need to grasp on to the power of having love.
Right.
Oh, no, I can't get rid of it. We're in love. This is never going to end.
Right. You're holding on.
Freaking King Lear, you know.
Right. Holding on.
You will die. You're no longer that. Right. You know. But really, if you would just speak your truth, wouldn't be in a lot of these situations.
Right.
You'd be like, honestly, no, this isn't working out for me. This is my truth. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be like Cordelia, and I'm not going to profess love right now because that's not what I'm feeling. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I'm sorry, brother. Like, it's just, that's not the way it's going down. This is my truth right now. And I'm going to be able to live freely because I express that. Mm-hmm. And because now I'm not living a reality I don't want to live. Yeah. You know, which the only reason I was sort of in that space to begin with is because I was trying to, same sort of thing, going back to my life story, the story I shared earlier. Yeah. Grasping onto, it was more of a power thing, struggle of like, I can be a husband, I can be, you know, keep a family together. Holding on to an identity. Instead of my own happiness, I wasn't happy. I wasn't being truthful to myself. Right. You know, and no parties were happy in this situation. And once truth was being spoken to power, we found peace, you know.
Why is it so scary to enter into one's truth?
Right.
Why is that so scary? What is this impulse? And you see it in Edmund, you see it in Goneril, you see it in Reagan. They're so desperate to grasp and to cling. And that's really, they're people with big egos who are terrified, you know, and they're suffering deeply, who are so scared. You know, you see that in people in power today who are so afraid of losing it.
Right.
But then what happens, you know, it's like, you lose it, King Lear style, you lose it and it's uncomfortable, you're out in the rain, but you feel good because you're not putting in all this strain and effort to keep the mask up, to keep the facade up.
Look at Joe Biden, you know, who they've related to sort of a Lear figure. He could have, he said I was going to be a one-term president.
Right.
And he probably could have saved the party and maybe the country if he would have just been like, cool, my term's done. You guys have your primary. let the people pick a new Democratic
Yeah,
leader.
why couldn't he let go? Yeah.
But he was too old. He held on, and then tragedy struck,
Yeah.
But then they interviewed him a year later, and he said he'd never found so much peace in his life.
Oh, after he dropped out of
after he
the
dropped
race.
out.
Oh yeah, of course.
And that's what's happening is we're burying ourselves under mountains of anxiety.
Trying to keep up
when
the
really
performance.
We just need to be truthful. That's the thing. Cordelia didn't perform. There's no performance in the way she lived her life.
Right.
And that is the beacon of truth.
Yeah. Yeah. But why is it scary though? Is it just because
I think it's scary because these things become us.
Yeah.
They become our identity. And you're literally having to kill off parts of yourself and be reborn, which is not a comfortable chain of events.
And we've talked about that one, the death simulation episode.
Simulator, yep. And even the Jaredvich, being Jared Malkovich episode.
Right. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I think it's one, we get so identified with these things. I'm a king, look at my robes, and I don't know who I am if I'm not a king, if I'm not King Lear, if I'm not the head of a nation or whatever. Yeah. So you identify with it, and it's a logical mistake because you think, if I lose this position of power, I'm going to die.
Right.
You're saying. But in fact, no, you're just losing a position of power. You're taking off a jacket.
Yeah.
But you think you're the jacket. So it's, extremely stressful, and you think you're dying, but you're not. That's the mold, the shell that we were talking about. And then I think there is a part of it that's just self-preservation.
Sure.
I think that my needs are, I have to have this much money a year in order to feel safe, and that I'm in control of life and all of that.
Yeah.
And I want to know where my next meal is coming from.
To survive in your career, you have to become sort of your career. And, I am an artist. I am a, engineer.
Whatever it is.
So this is related too, but back to Andor, there's this good scene in the first season where, Andor, they're going to do this heist or whatever. And he's in this little, village of the low-techs, essentially,
Cool.
And, there's an Imperial lieutenant who's in the rebellion, but is, works for the Empire. And he's like, what's his story? Everybody knows his story. Like, what's his story? And the girl's like, all right, this is what happened to him. She's like, he was in the Empire, rising in the ranks.
Oh, cool.
And then he met one of the villagers where the Empire was set up on his base, and he fell in love with her. And then the Empire demoted him.
Yeah.
And didn't let him get promoted.
Yeah.
And then the girl broke up with him.
Oh.
And then he hated the Empire.
Oh.
And then she says, we all have our own rebellion.
Oh.
And that's sort of the King Lear thing too, is it was stripped from him, not only the Empire, but also the love of the lover of the village.
Yeah.
So then he just became a sulky rebel who honestly just hated the Empire entirely for what they did.
Right.
And what they've done to the people and all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
But that's the good line, is we all have our own rebellion. All of us go through these crazy changes within ourselves. Yeah. Because events like that happen. And think about it, you could get like a crazy good job at some get your counseling thing, psychology, whatever, get into like this crazy, interesting, like clinic, whatever.
Who knows?
You know, all of a sudden, and then you fall in love with one of the, you know, nurses or something, and then they find out and they're like, oh, sorry, you're not going to actually get that office anymore. And then she breaks up with you, and then you're just like, man, fuck this place entirely.
Right.
You know, and then what happens is your whole entire world, King Lear, gets shattered. But then what happens? Something good.
Yeah.
That person in that story in Andor, he starts living his truth.
Yeah.
He dies for his truth.
Exactly.
And when they bust him during the heist, the captain's like, you're gonna hang for this, and he's like, I deserve worse for working under you for the past 7 years. But he's free. He's ready to die. He's free. And we see that in Shakespeare. We see that in real life.
Yeah.
Those who are ready to die aren't necessarily the most spiritual, the most religious, the most wealthiest, the ones with the most kids, this and that.
Yeah.
The ones that are ready to die are the ones that were living by their truth. The ones that aren't ready to die are the ones that have massive regrets.
Right. Oh, you're right.
I worked for the Empire for 30 years and I did horrendous, you know, whatever it is. Whatever your metaphorical empire is, whether it's a bad relationship, bad job, being a king, whatever, right? That's regret. Living by truth.
Mm-hmm.
That's peace.
Yeah.
And then you can pass on to the next life.
See, yeah. And I had a conversation with someone up at the Zen Center, and, you know, this kind of King Lear moments happening. I just commented and said, you really can't hold on to anything, can you? And she immediately, without even thinking, she's just, nope. Wow. Yeah. And that's part of Buddhist teaching and philosophy you can't, it's all impermanent.
Right.
You can't hold on to anything. And the more you try to hold on to things and grasp and cling and control and manipulate life in such a way that you'll finally feel okay, that turns you into Edmund. That turns you into Gonril Reagan.
Right.
Whereas when you can let go of that desperation and that need to control and that need to grasp and just enter into your truth more fully, the truth will set you free.
Not in a cynical way, not in a I'll never love anything.
I'll
never, you know, like have a strong, long lasting bond or attachment.
Right.
But making sure that we're bonding and attaching with healthy things.
With truth and authenticity. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So what's happening is we're showing up to the theme park, which is life. And you're in the line, and imagine you could get inside the park. You just have to be truthful. You know, you just have to live by your truth, and you can live.
Oh, I like that.
But you're getting so old. You've been in this line so long. You're gonna die. You can't die. You haven't been. You haven't gone into the park yet. You haven't gone into Disneyland yet. You haven't even seen it. You've been waiting in this line for so long, and you're refusing and refusing. Well, of course you don't want to die yet. You haven't lived. Right. But if you just live by your truth, you get that ticket. You get to go into the amusement park of life. You get to live. Then you're not afraid to leave. In fact, you're ready to leave after a while.
Dude, exactly.
Because you're tired.
You did what you had to do.
And you did it, you know, and it was fun, and it was, you know, a long lasting memory, and it was impactful, and and you can go home, you know, to rest, so to speak, into the undiscovered country, Hampod, and never return, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, that is the undiscovered country.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And to second what you're saying too, it is. Yeah, it's not about exchanging one system for another where now I'm homeless on the street saying I'm free, you know, that's a misinterpretation. Sure. I think it's about authentic truth in everything you're doing arising.
Right.
You're doing a career that is aligned with who you are.
Yes.
Not because you're trying to impress people around you or because you're desperate for a certain sum of money, it's because it's authentically feels who you are.
Right.
Or you're in a relationship that feels like an authentic, truthful arising.
Yes.
Rather than I'm clinging, hanging on, and scared to be alone, all that sort of stuff.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I like that too, sort of living by our truth. I was watching the Gran Turismo movie, and that's based on a true story. And they set up one year they actually like got the best Gran Turismo players in the world, PlayStation game.
Yeah.
And had them come and race actual cars, and they made a champion of one of them. Yeah. And Grand Prix is freaking crazy, you know. But the actual story of the gamer's life is pretty awesome and incredible. And
wait, this movie's about a gamer's life?
Yeah, it's about that true story.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, so it's really cool. And the dad like wants him to play soccer, and it's just like, why are you always playing these video games? You should like learn from your younger brother and like get outside, you know.
Yeah.
And he's just like, I don't like soccer. I don't like football.
Yeah.
Like I never have. I'm good at this and I love it. And I'm doing that. And then look what happened. He found this, all of a sudden stumbled onto this crazy opportunity where they invited him personally, you know, out of only a few gamers to go compete in that competition, you know?
Yeah. And there's so many stories like that. Like someone told me once about this guy who was, I think like, I don't know, his late 30s or something. And he had climbed up this corporate business and married the boss's daughter and was set to take over the business, but he was miserable and hated his life and hated himself and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And was doing it because he thought he had to and everything. And then he gets cancer, partly possibly because his soul was like, fuck this sucks. I hate this game. Let's leave. So he gets cancer and then recovers from the cancer and is so changed because he sees the impermanence of life. It freed him up to some extent where he goes, oh shit, I was doing the wrong thing my entire life. I actually want to be a musician and play violin. He wanted to play violin as a kid, and his dad called him gay or something and broke the violin over his head. It's over, you know, and then ends up recovering and then quits the corporate job. And then the wife divorces him because he quit the corporate job. Right. And now it's and that must have been fucking scary,
Lear
dude. Now you're King Lear.
Yeah.
Cancer, quitting your corporate job, your trophy wife divorcing you, just King Lear moment, letting go of everything until that dude just started playing violin and then just had a much more fulfilling life and did what he wanted to do. And, you know, it was nothing incredibly special. It's not like he'd, you know, ended up becoming this like hyper world famous violin player or something like that, but he just became healthy essentially and just got to enjoy his truth and enjoy his life.
Yes.
You know, he told the truth and then got to enter into the theme park of life. Okay,
so this I think we're coming to a good crescendo here on King Lear. For me, it's a play of hope.
Cool.
When we feel like we've lost everything in our lives, when we feel like the mold's broken, I'm worthless, I made all these mistakes, I can never be forgiven, I can never find truth or peace, guess what? You've never been closer. Because it's not until we have our King Lear moment that we can find truth, that we can break our mold and we can find true love. And we can have, you know, people like Cordelia in our lives, like the Jester, like our friend, you know, who got his eyes plucked out of his head. And that's another good one, is the Earl of Gloucester.
Yeah.
Is he finally sees once his eyes have been removed.
Exactly.
He says, why do I need eyes? I have no path to take, right? Yeah. But it's not until then that he finds Lear, who finds him, they find each other, and he finds Edgar, his son, who he loves, right?
Exactly.
So it's a play of hope. It's a beautiful thing. It's a play of forgiveness, you know.
I love that.
It's great.
I really appreciate that sentiment. Yeah. When you think you're furthest away from truth because it's hurting and that's when you're actually closest.
Yes.
If anything, you're hurting because you're not allowing the truth.
Right. Because it's already leaving you.
Yeah.
You're already in the process.
Oh God, that was beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Beautifully said.
Any other final thoughts on the play? I just wanted to note too that I appreciated the creativity of the jester. I know we mentioned a lot just how he's speaking truth to Lear, but they also have this weird friendship, but this challenging friendship too, where he's challenging him, he's a foil to him, he annoys him, but he loves him. Yeah. But is he also, even in the narrative to begin with, we were talking about that, where it's kind of like a Fight Club thing, Tyler Durden. Yeah. Where the jester is always there, but it like not really acknowledged by any of the other characters per se. But Lear, he's always very much connected to Lear constantly in his dialogue and his thing. So it begs the question, was that the first sort of story of, was the jester even a real character?
Was he even real? Yeah. And then the jester just disappears. The fool, and that's a weird thing. The fool just, this is why he is like a Tyler Durden. Right. Because the fool randomly disappears. He's gone. And then you see King Lear wearing the fool's hat. Right. And in the beginning of the play, there's all this joking between the fool and Lear, where he's taking off his hat and putting it on Lear's head, and like, who's wearing the coxcomb now?
I beg you to take the coxcomb. Yeah.
I beg you to take the coxcomb. And then at the end, Lear takes the hat, and the fool has disappeared, meaning they have integrated. Yes. And that's something too that you hear in some spiritual teachings, that there's kind of the higher self or true self, whatever you want to call it. Right. And then it's this process of integrating with that higher self. Yes. And then once that integration process is complete, there's no more split. You're not getting, this intuitive voice giving you the messages for what to do. You're just fucking living it freely because you've become the higher self.
Exactly. Yes.
So it gets pretty heady and deep. Yeah.
And sort of like the Drop Dead Fred thing, where it's this movie about imaginary friend this little girl has. Yeah. And, once she matures and she doesn't need him anymore and he disappears, you know. There you go. Yeah. But it's a sort of digression on maturity and a healthy thing that happens to us. Right. And sort of same thing in Lear is his Fred, Drop Dead Fred, disappears once he finally finds peace, once he finally matures and becomes the Alder to his body. Right. His spiritual self, his emotional self, his personality has matured to now match his senior citizen, the gray hair, which is coveted by, that's something to covet because it represents wisdom, represents, perseverance, all this stuff. Right. Yeah. And that's true power for a human. That's true, wealth and something that can benefit others. Right. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, and I'll say too that it's not a one and done process, and I've figured that out and have felt some strain over it, because I'll see these narratives about truth and freedom and letting go of all the shit you were holding on to, and you would think it's a one and done sort of thing. You spend 6 hours in the rain like Lear did, and all of a sudden you're a new man and you're free, and maybe that happens sometimes. We had a conversation about the near death experience, people who go to the other side and come back, and then they live in a totally different way, a more free way. There's that, but
even that's not easy either. Right?
No, that's not easy
and
either.
Even Lear, look at Lear. He was in that sort of ether. In the wilderness,
he was in the other world
a long time.
Yes,
Shakespeare doesn't put a time period on it, but
no, and you do get the sense he might be amount in there.
Of time.
Yeah, it's like the hyperbolic time chamber, because he goes into this fourth dimensional realm essentially, where there is no time or space.
And same thing with like, you know, mass injuries. I know a few weeks ago I texted you, I wanted to bring up Jeremy Renner and his near death experience. The snowplow fell over him. Well, one reason why his whole entire life changed. He even sold his house in Hollywood so he could go live in his small little cabin, you know. Wow. And he said that represented his whole self. That wasn't who he was anymore.
Right.
But it was a long journey. He almost died, and then it was years already now, a few years of recovery, learning how to walk again, believing in yourself, dealing with the pain, you know, all that stuff, being in the wilderness, you know.
He's an actor,
finding
Jeremy Renner?
Yeah.
What was he in?
He was most famous for being Hawkeye in Marvel movies.
Oh, that dude.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah. I knew the name.
He does like music, and he's been in a lot of awesome movies, you know, Ben Affleck, whatever, a bunch of cool stuff. But, you know, he had this good quote I wanted to bring up, and, you know, I thought maybe it'd bring up some good conversation, but he said, I discovered that in order to settle on what I really want, my intentions, in order to make intentions come true, I have to do what I don't want to do constantly. I'm constantly doing what my mind is saying I shouldn't do.
Oh God, that is.
And he said, once exhausting. I do that, then I realized that I start getting the things that I wanted.
Wow.
So every time he didn't want to get up in bed, every time he didn't want to work out, every time he doesn't want to breathe through tubes, every time he doesn't want to do this, well, he does it. Yeah. And then it's better. And he said the same thing with his kids and his family. Every time he doesn't want to go pick up the kids, every want to sign them up for another camp or do this or that, he does it. And then what does he find at the end of the week? More love from his family.
Exactly.
Better health from his body. All this. So it's kind of crazy how our conscious brain can almost lie to us.
Oh, it's fucked. Yeah.
And be like, oh, I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to eat healthy. Are you kidding me? I'm freaking, this is going to kill me. But if you do what you then you get what you really want inside, which is health, love, you know, truth.
It's the difficult medicine. Right. And it's, wow. Yeah. And it's the mind's way of feeling safe or all of that. So and that's what's cool about Lear.
Yes.
The play itself is that, because I was going to say it's not this one and done thing. Right. It's actually a moment by moment thing, like Jeremy Renner's saying, right? Because every moment that I just don't feel like getting out of bed yet. Right. Okay, that's the Lear moment. Right. And then there's the more true self that's like, well, if you're going to live a rich life and do, you know, whatever you need to do, accomplish what you want to, live your truth, you're going to have to get out of bed right now. Right. So then even in that, you see that tension between deception, hiding under the covers, hiding in the robes, trying to be the king. Right. And then the truth of, I need to expose myself, get out of bed and live my life. Yes. And then the next thing, man, I just want to have like a egg sandwich with a ton of bacon and fried and all that kind of stuff. And then that's your Lear moment. And then you realize, no, I need to have a healthy breakfast, and that's going to make me more energized and feel good for the day and all of that. And having the hard medicine, you know, swallowing the tough medicine. So it's Lear played out moment to moment. Are you choosing your truth, or are you choosing your fear and your grasping? Right. So we're constantly having these awakenings, you know, constantly little micro awakenings that have to happen throughout your entire life. Exactly. Honestly, and then those micro awakenings to get the result that we want at the end, which is ultimate peace. Yeah. Happiness. You did what you have to do. The micro awakenings that grow and expand into the macro awakenings. Yeah. And not only to say that, you know, you were loved, but to, you know, love, to say you were beloved, you know. Yeah. The Carver thing, you know. Yeah. Wait, what was that? The Carver thing? I don't want to mess up the quote, but you know, he said at the end of his life, he wanted to not only have loved, but to have been beloved. Oh, okay. You know? Yeah. But it was like a two thing there.
You know, the little layering, the cake layering of the give and the take as well.
Right,
you know?
right.
But I don't know, brilliant play. It's also bad. Like, it's funny. I was listening to an interview of this, I don't know, Shakespearean scholar on NPR or whatever, and he was saying how Shakespeare is always seen as, you have to be smart in order to get this. He was always told, "Oh, you just don't get it. You're not smart enough.
That's not true
this
at
is
all.
for smart people." And he said once he got smart enough, like book smart, and started reading it and all this and going to the plays, he realized that for him, Shakespeare sucked. He didn't like Shakespeare. Huh. He was like, "Oh, this play is the worst," you know.
Oh, funny.
And like, but then he ended up growing to like get attached to other works, you know. And he was a scholar in drama, you know. And talked about other playwrights and this and that, you know. Cool. So I do think that there is something left to be desired in King Lear. Yeah. Like the whole premise of the daughters and stuff, it's a little ridiculous. It's a little wild. Hans Christian Andersen. It's a little unbelievable too. Like he's so irrational. Right. It's just like, oh my God, bro. Like really, like this is like kind of like comical. It's so ridiculous, you know?
Sure. Yeah, and you could criticize it. I mean, okay, Cordelia too. I mean, you can even say she's an incredibly two-dimensional character. Sure. There's nothing interesting or fascinating about Cordelia. Right. She's quite literally just the symbolic representation of truth. She's not an actual character. She does nothing. She has no depth. She has no desires or anything. She just sits there and cries, gives up her husband, then goes happily with the French dude, and then just cries and then dies. She has no subjective experience of the world. She's just a symbol, you know? Right, totally.
Whereas like Macbeth, you know, the premise of Macbeth isn't amazing, you know. It's simple, it's nice, it's neat, it's tidy. There's depth with Lady Macbeth and him and, you know, the rise to power and this and that. And it's believable. You know, the drama is believable. It's like, oh shit, this dude got visited by some crazy freaking Taos witches and like his wife wants him to kill this dude. And like that actually happens in the world, you know. And I don't know, even like Romeo and Juliet, like that's believable. Like teenagers fall in love and it is so beautiful, but also so tragic and like, you know, ridiculous. And
I mean, that's over the top too, though. Romeo and Juliet happens over the course of like 3 days. I mentioned
it too in the pod too, just how ridiculous it is.
I mean, Macbeth is kind of ridiculous comical. Too. He's you know, it's like, what's with these 3 witches? And like, is it like that is weird. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, sure. You know? Yeah. That would be like I met someone today who was telling me that they made a major life decision based on a tarot card reading. Yeah. And I was like, what the hell did you do that for? You know, and it turned out to be, you know, a mediocre decision. And it was like, well, yeah, because you like what? Because you had some Taos witch tell you about the cards and your fate. Macbeth. Like, what the hell? Yeah. You know? So I don't know. Shakespeare is kind of fantastical, you know, but I do see what you're saying because King, the whole premise is bizarre. It's definitely a little bit like it's like he had his homework was due soon and he had to like finish the essay, you know, before class the next day, you know.
Like I like the Edgar Edmund feud almost a little bit. Even it competes with the main narrative. I feel like you know that it has even more depth and strength to it than Lear's madness in a way. And then even Lear's like thing, he's in a storm. That's like his change of heart. It's like, dang, you're cold. Like that's
you're cold.
That's all it took. Have you ever been outside, buddy? Like
it's never been outside.
Yeah. Whereas like I just feel like a lot of the other ones they have like relatable like
that's fair. It's like a tighter narrative. It's a tighter narrative.
Right. The inciting incidents are more believable in a lot of the other ones.
Totally.
Then
and then there's Edgar too / poor Tom, the good brother who just kind of last couple of points that come to mind. But Edgar, he flees thinking that Edmund creates this whole deception that people are after Edgar and want to kill him because whatever. And then Edgar flees and then is living out in the wilderness and strips down naked and goes in disguise as poor Tom.
Right.
And then we meet poor Tom, and then Lear's conversing with him, and Lear keeps calling him a philosopher and the truest philosopher. And why is he the philosopher? Because he is the one who is in the wilderness, who is naked in the wilderness, the unaccommodated man, the thing itself.
Right. Yeah.
He has entered into his truth.
Sure.
And Edgar was already kind of like Cordelia. He's sort of already in the side of truth.
The good son. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's a philosopher in the sense of philosophy as a way of being, not just a way of thinking.
Right. Yeah. And he's very much naked Tom. Yeah.
Exactly.
Like he's literally bare.
Freely naked.
Right.
Yeah. Right. This is who I am. I have nothing to hide.
Soul.
Yeah. Body and soul.
Right.
Yeah. And then last point I want to make was at Gloucester, there's a scene. It's kind of a weird scene. I didn't even notice it when we were watching it last night, but I noticed it and when I've watched the play before. But I think it's Edgar, poor Tom, who's Gloucester's son, convinces Gloucester that he's going to step off a cliff, and he's blind because his eyes have been gouged out. So then he believes that he's walking towards a cliff. Because I think Gloucester was like, I'm going to kill myself. Do you remember the scene?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Gloucester's like, I'm going to kill myself because I've had enough. Like my eyes got gouged out. I'm done.
Right.
But he can't find a cliff because
he
he's
falls
blind.
In the sand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then poor Tom, Edgar, his son, says, well, okay, follow me.
Right.
There's a cliff 5 feet in front of you. Just run.
Right.
And he does it and then trips and falls, thinking that he has a near-death experience. He thinks that he falls.
Right.
And then it's after that Gloucester's now free.
Yeah.
You know?
Crazy, yeah.
Yeah, and there's all these moments of weirdly shamanic therapeutic modalities that are happening because Gloucester, he's despairing and saying, I want to die, and then gets to have the performed experience of death. He gets to have a induced near-death experience in order to move through that. Lear, at some point when they're in that little hovel, they finally find some shelter from the storm. And then Lear is talking to a stool and like a lamp or something as if he's talking to Goneril and Reagan, and he's actually processing the grief and the trauma of what his daughters had done to him.
Right. That's
an actual therapeutic modality. Like I've read this in therapy books and psychological books that you can actually do performative psychological healing by having someone, you have your client or whoever sit there, and then you point to the lamp and say, okay, this is your mother. And then you point to the chair and say, this is your father. What did you need to say to them that you never got to say to them?
Yeah.
And then the person does it. And it actually, at least from what I read, it seems to work pretty well with helping people release the energy behind that stuff.
I like that too, because is it Gloucester that says, lead me to the crazy man, let him lead me? Remember we were talking about that? He's like, I don't want you to lead me anymore. Please lead me to this crazy person.
Oh, yeah.
And I want them to guide me. And he's like, are you sure you want this? You know? But what's really happening is the philosopher, right? The one speaking the truth, the shaman.
Yeah.
The non-normative.
Yeah.
That's who should be leading us. And though it seems like a crazy idea.
Yeah.
Well, it's crazy because our imperial side, the empire, wants us to stay in submission, wants us to stay King Lear.
Right.
So we think, oh, going out there and freeing your mind is crazy,
Yeah,
but that's
yeah.
where we should go, because we don't want those eyes anymore. We should have them out foul jelly, so we can finally see and finally get led in the right direction, which makes me think, which could be a conversation for another pod, but, it would be interesting to read an article, if there is one, on the drug use of Shakespeare and during Shakespeare's time, because
I looked into this once.
specifically, psilocybin mushrooms sort of thing, where you go into this realm of madness,
Right.
and come out a different person, a better person.
Yeah.
You follow the fool in a way, which your normative conscious brain is afraid of and thinks is crazy.
Right.
But honestly, that's exactly what your body needed to change. And I was listening to this interesting thing on the Y-Files, actually, and how the stoned ape theory.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know about that one.
And it's just interesting that when we take mushrooms, our brain synapse and stuff, they start communicating with other portions of the brain that they never would have before. And they actually connect with each other.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
we change, like biologically change in our brains after we do these drugs,
Yeah, and that's why it's beginning to be used on
right,
veterans and people suffering from
and look
PTSD.
at Lear, he's tripping his balls off out there.
Oh yeah, that's
in
what's
the storm,
happening.
That's what he's talking to an imaginary.
Yeah, he's on an ayahuasca trip. He's going through the storm.
Right.
So, you're totally right. In watching Shakespeare, it's just like the language, the the characters have such this archetypal resonance that really is, the kind of a mushroom consciousness thing. At least, in some experiences of mine, it's like everything becomes the archetype of itself. It becomes the platonic form of itself. It's not just, it becomes an archetype, and that Shakespeare is all archetypes. It's all Jungian in that sense. I mean, Jung came 400 years after Shakespeare, so you wouldn't call it that, but
sure.
So I've questioned, was Shakespeare using some kind of drugs? And I looked it up, and there was some article that I found, but it was really grasping at straws. It was pretty dumb, actually. It was trying to claim that there was a pipe that was found in what would have been Shakespeare's residence, and they were examining the pipe and said that there may have been some sort of hemp or kind of cannabinoid in it or something, which maybe, but then they were also not even sure if that's definitely where Shakespeare lived. And it just was a dumb article. But I get the sense that yes, but then that he was, on something. But then at the same time, you look at a guy like Carl Jung, who was not, to my knowledge anyway, I don't think Jung was using any psychedelic substances, but he just lived there. He just had that genius mind where he just lived in that incredibly fluid, incredibly archetypal, almost meditative state throughout his entire life, and just lived and created from that state. He was also constantly doing lucid dreaming and stuff like that. So maybe that's how he accessed it. So Shakespeare too, who knows what maybe he was doing lucid dreaming every single night, having images of these characters come to him.
Right.
Maybe he did find a cow patch with mushrooms growing in it.
I'd love to even hear his own personal story. If he had King Lear moments, he had moments of growth, and his son died. His son died when he was young. Hamlet, but with an N. Like that was William Shakespeare's son Hamlet died when he was a kid, and Shakespeare, that was devastating for Shakespeare. And then he wrote Hamlet not long after. I mean, the guy definitely had his personal King Lear moments. Right.
Had to have.
Oh yeah.
Or moments that I'm sure, like when he was a young playwright and thought it was a big thing and thought he was going to be famous or something, and then his first play got shit on, or whatever,
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
On behalf of the Jareds, thank you for listening. Follow, rate, and tell your friends. The Jareds will be back next time, and always remember, thou shouldst not have been old till thou hadst been wise. Have a safe night.
Need another podcast? Give Jared and Jared a try today. No, don't do that. But they're saying do it, so that's the ad.